A few years ago, I made a podcast about learning to swim. Not a podcast aimed at those who are at the right age to learn to swim, namely kids, but learning to swim as an adult. The point of the podcast was to underline just how hard it is to learn new skills and maybe reprogram yourself when you're older. I learned an awful lot of things while making that podcast. Sadly, one of them was not learning to swim, but that's for another time. What I did learn was that being older creates many more barriers, and you think a lot more about things, and thinking sometimes stops you doing. If you think about this with media careers in mind, it underlines just how hard it is sometimes to retrain and move into something like journalism from another sector later in your career. But apply yourself and make that step, and it can be very rewarding. And on this episode, I talked to someone who made that change and continues to change and develop and learn. And that's something that I really admire. I'm David Spencer, and welcome to the Media Mentor podcast. This is all about media careers and sharing my advice and guidance on how to progress your career. Already, we've learned about AI in recruitment, the psychology of getting stuck in your career, and asking what actually a career really means in 2025. This episode features the fantastic Leonie Zeumer, someone I first had mentoring sessions with back in 2019. As you'll hear, she's been on quite the journey since, and now works as a presenter for CGTN in Beijing. Leonie, thank you so much for joining the podcast. You are the first guest that I've had speaking to me from as far away as Beijing. Thank you very much indeed for giving me the time and speaking to me. What I would like to do is always go back to first conversations. And I was trying, when I thought of this episode, to picture actually where I was when I think I had a phone call with you first of all. Maybe you'd got in touch by email, but for some reason I picture myself actually having just finished a lecture at university and then speaking to you. What was your situation when you found me and got in touch?
I believe it must have been around 2018, 2019, when I did my first journalism and found you on the internet. And my situation was thus. So I had just completed the NCTJ journalism diploma. I've just done that while working as a marketing manager for an IT company, while also endeavoring in hosting some quiz shows, hosting and presenting some short video formats that helped me pay my rent. And from this marketing job, I really wanted to get into media. I mean, at the heart of my background was always storytelling. I have a degree in drama and theater arts. But once I got into this presenting side gig, I really enjoyed this. And I thought, hey, wouldn't that be great if I could do this for real? If I could, do real stories, be a real life news presenter. So I wanted to be good and, not kind of cheat my way into this. So I've done the NCTJs, which was one of the hardest things I've done so far in my life, to be fair. And then I was, staring into the big abyss that is the media news world, not knowing anybody there, not knowing anything. And with my background in marketing, everything that I gotten in that world, in the corporate world, was through LinkedIn. And back in the day, even, I mean, is it back in the day, but it was so that I didn't even really have a CV. I don't know, David, if you remember how in shambles my CV was, but it was pretty bad because I really never had to have one. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you really picked me up from the start here. I really didn't have much to go off because I was kind of dabbling in marketing, dabbling in acting, dabbling in presenting, but really had nothing to do with news apart from having done my NCTJs. So I presented you with quite the challenge.
But I also think that CV, I remember I do this thing with many clients that annoys Mrs. Mentor when I tell her I do it, but I say, at the start of a session, what would you score your CV out of 10? And sort of get the client to think where they are with whether they think it's good, but it's doing something wrong, or they just think it's awful, or they have no idea. And generally, they have no idea where it sits, which is why we're having the conversation. And I think what you've described is very similar to people that I've met, maybe even in their 50s as clients, who have been in a job or in an industry for quite a while and haven't needed a CV. And it can be very confusing. So I think I definitely recall shaping that. Again, I use an example, a potter's wheel. There was a lump of clay there, but I'm not sure what the shape was, and it needed to be a media CV. What you talk about there with that dabbling, was that something that you worried about? What am I? I've got this NCTJ now, but I'm doing marketing and I'm doing a bit of video stuff. What am I? How do I sell that?
Exactly. So I knew what I wanted. I want to be a news presenter. I really want to be on camera. I've also done a course in broadcasting specifically for that. So I felt like I was actually pretty well prepared in terms of skills, but I had no idea how to tell anyone about them. And I was, I think I even sent some applications to somewhere and never got any feedback. And that also gave me pause and was thinking, hey, hold on, I might be doing something wrong, because I know I have the skills, but I didn't really know how to apply them to the job offers that were out there either. Because you also gave me a perspective of, I'm sorry, but it was really as basic as, what's the format of it? Because an acting CV looks very different. And for the marketing thing that I got through LinkedIn, that was all like wishy-washy. So I think you had to start it from the ground up with me, even like, how do you format it? I remember that you gave me quite a lovely idea of also how to make it visually appealing. I mean, we literally started from there, how to outline it.
And actually, there are blogs that people can read about a CV. They can see what I recommend, but it's actually, every person is different. So you sometimes need to have the conversation to shape it. So not knowing what a CV needs to look like or kind of say, and in the order it needs to say it, is quite a common theme. But I think one thing you touched on, which is interesting, also a common theme though, is that no feedback to that point. So you seek me out, you have a conversation, but you're very much in the dark before then. You're not hearing anything to sort of give you guidance. That can be really demoralizing, I guess.
Absolutely. And that was the point where I was like, well, should I give up now? Did I just, go through the agony of the NCTJs for nothing? So yeah, it was really good to find you, and then also understand like how to start from the basics. And I remember we had a couple of sessions where we then really dug deeper into, I have the skills and I actually done some corporate marketing work, but how does that actually apply to where I want to go? And you could thread the needle for me there very well and made it quite clear for me, which is something that I really didn't see at all. And that sort of kind of, got a bit of a light bulb moment on the top of my head and was like, oh, actually, yeah, everything that I've done so far is actually really relevant for these jobs. I just need to put it in my CV first thing, because I think I didn't even mention a lot of the things.
So there's transferable skills there, obviously, and thinking about stuff that you've done that still has value for a role that you are going for. But I think in your case as well, one of the things we discussed was, well, the NCTJ, it's tough. It's a difficult course, but you do stuff on it. You produce content, and it's about pulling things out from that experience, which could also add to your experience and come to the thing that I talk about a lot, demonstrable skills, show people what you can do and how you've done it, rather than just be too generic.
One of the things that I also remember, which was so cool. So I was working at a quiz show back then. It was just like some online fun thing, but it was a live feed and it was with a teleprompter. And I remember we were just talking casually on the side that I was like, oh, David, this one time the teleprompter just stopped working and my producer freaked out. So I literally just had to talk, I think, for 2 minutes, which, can be a very long time if you don't know what you're saying, if you just have to kind of keep people engaged, you don't want people switching off. It's a live feed. So I had to talk for 2 minutes till we got back on track. And then that is brilliant. That is a skill, which I would have never even thought about to put this on my CV, but I can tell people now, rather than the usual, keeps a cool head in difficult situations. I can literally tell them exactly what the difficult situation was and how I did keep my cool and did waffle on for 2 minutes and get the show going. So that was actually also super interesting.
And I think what is interesting about that kind of example is I had a conversation with a client once who said, but I was going to talk about these things, that specific example, in an interview, because I remember that teleprompter moment and I would have talked about it in an interview. And I said, well, you're not getting any interviews. So who are you telling that experience to? Maybe think about putting it in a cover letter or putting it in CVs. And that is a very different mindset than a lot of people have. Did you also find, because you were then being nudged by me to think of those examples and pull those examples out, that the conversations you eventually had for roles and for jobs was better because all of that was front of mind?
So much better. So I remember I had an interview and I actually mentioned that I've been to Iraq, and it wasn't for news reporting as such, but I made a movie there, and I know it's an acting skill. But I was in Iraq, and I got exposed to a lot of different things, and I don't know if it made me look more worldly or open to different cultures, whatever it was. But I told the story because I remembered from our conversations and your mentoring that all of these things tell people who I am, right? Everybody has an NCTJ, everybody can have a master's or a degree, but this is something that I can bring to the table that makes me me and makes me unique and what I've experienced and what I can bring to a team or to a workplace.
I guess that advice stays with you.
It really does, because it's transferable. It's very obviously relevant to the media industry specifically. But now when I'm, looking to the future, looking to, go job hunting again, it's something that I've taken with me back in 2018 when we first spoke. I've taken this from all my job applications, right? And I've had a lot of jobs since then. And I've always had our conversations on the back of my mind, looking at actual demonstrable skills and really taking the format that we established for me and my CV and my cover letter back in the day. And I'm dragging this into the present now. And it has helped me to this very day.
You can have an NCTJ, you can have a degree, you can have a master's, but to some degree, that's just the start point. And the failure is to then go, okay, but what makes me good at, say, the degree and the academic studies? But you need to show those things and pull the skills out in a demonstrable way, as I mentioned. But also, as you say, even something that might seem disconnected is part of that story and helps your perspective. And that's really valuable when you're thinking about diversity of opinion and diversity of kind of background, because we often don't think of that as being reasons to be different. And those are all part of a story. So having come to me, got the CV into shape, helped with the cover letters, you actually cracked this nut. And I think over a period of time, the pandemic happened, but you've been in a couple of places, you've traveled around, you've been in the UK, you've been Austria, I think you've been now in Beijing. I just want to ask you about that. Did you notice cultural differences where you're kind of thinking even how you apply and how you talk about jobs is different? Because I think for a lot of people who listen, who come from different countries, the UK seems very specific and almost unique in some of the things that we do.
I really think our conversations and your hard work with me bore some fruit, because I eventually became a lead news editor at an online magazine in London. But that then helped me to become a kind of content and digital producer for Red Bull, which was in Austria, which then allowed me to be more in front of camera and allowed me to then become actually eventually a news presenter at CGTN here in Beijing. And the cultural difference is palpable in all of these things. And again, I think what's very important there is to be able to adapt and not lose faith in your abilities. And that's something, again, I learned then from the ground up that, like Iraq, like teleprompter failures, little things. I mean, I came into all of this quite later in life, right? I came to you, I was end of my 20s, beginning of my 30s even. when I decided I wanted this career change, but not to discredit everything that happened before, but to take this as an opportunity and to take this as unique extra skills that I can offer was then always in the back of my mind, because that's something that you really brought home to me. So with that in mind, I could adapt to different cultures and different ways of going about things. I'd say Austria a bit more methodical, contradictory to maybe some prejudices that are out there. Chinese a bit more superficial. You don't go too much into detail, especially in the conversation rounds of the interviews. I had to submit something quite physical, like a whole pitch of a show and news packages. But then when talking about things, they were quite polite and quite, I would say, just only scratching the surface. I didn't really want to understand the nooks and cranny. They were quite polite in that way.
A couple of things I want to pick up on. That journey that you just mapped out around the globe, but in terms of jobs, could you have forecast or even plotted that at the start?
It's so difficult. And then at the end of the day, I just went with the flow, to be fair, and also just see where, where I landed. And I think it does, happen for a reason that a certain job or company picks you up. I think then you also need to trust that sometimes the right people hopefully see something in you and pick you up. And from there you go on. Obviously, I never stopped wanting to be in front of the camera. So from the lead news editing job, I really, really wanted to be in front of the camera. So I really pushed for it. But if you would have told me that I land at CGTN in Beijing, I would have laughed. If you would have told me that back in the day, I never thought that would happen. And I think one of the things as well, I am German. I know my English is good, but I'm close to native, but I'm not native. I grew up with an English stepfather. I grew up in Germany with a bilingual school, so I know I have a lot of English, but I think people can hear that I'm not English. And a lot of people told me I will never make it on camera because of that. I could only maybe just do it in Germany in German. And that's not true. I made it. I mean, I'm in an international English speaking channel, and it's a pretty big one. And this is also something that maybe if somebody's listening and people have told them that they cannot do this or that, I think you can.
Well, no, I think that's a really important point to make, because I'm really proud of that. And your English is fantastic, and I would have definitely not said to you early on, this is not possible. There are sometimes people who will say, I'd like to do this job, and I go, okay, at the moment that's going to be a challenge. It's not for me to say no, don't have the ambition, or no, you can't do it. And I think given the right kind of mindset and the right bit of luck, because there's an awful lot of luck in this pathway that we all go on, that pretty much most things are achievable. One other thing I wanted to pick up on, because you mentioned it, I wasn't going to mention age, but because you mentioned it first, I can get away with it. But do you think that being a bit older, doing that NCTJ later, meant any advantage, or was it the disadvantage, which is, whoa, literally time is ticking, there's a bit more pressure?
I just think it added a little more challenge, because I was one of the few people who done that while working full time, essentially, right? So I've done the NCTJ within a year, and I think you can do it even shorter and then do it this full time, but that wasn't an option for me because I had to work. So doing this alongside the job was very, very hard. On the other hand, I would say it also gave me a bit of a perspective of what I'm letting myself into, and I took it on board as a bit of a sounding board as well. I was like, if I want to do this, I need to be able to learn, and I need to get this degree. I really want to do this properly, and I want to have the skills to do a good job then, and be picked up and really get into the media industry. So it was an extra challenge. But then for me, it was a sounding board of, can I actually do this as well, which was very good.
Do you feel that you definitely needed that to make the step, or do you think that you could have done it without?
I really needed it. I think this was to this day, if I now, I mean, I don't stand still. I'm already thinking of the next job. This is really important that I've done this degree. I'm studying now again. I can't sit still. I love learning, but this degree in journalism is really the foundation, I think, for all the jobs that I really loved so far of having gotten them. It's because I had that. I love my degree. I have a degree from Goldsmiths in drama and theater arts. Best time of my life, was wonderful, but I must admit that this degree hasn't gotten me the jobs that I really wanted to. So this was really necessary, and I'm very proud of myself. I've done it, and I passed it, and it has helped me so much on my path into the media industry.
I think for everyone, that is a decision that can kind of suit people very individually. And it's, again, not a right thing. Do I need to do a degree in journalism? Do I need to do an NCTJ having done another degree? Each time it's down to the individual, and you need to assess that. And I think that's quite important. Just as you look back on what is, you've done fantastically well, some amazing brands, as you mentioned, with Red Bull, CGTN, that you've got now added to your portfolio and experience. Is there anything that you've learned even since our conversations and on this journey that you'd share that you think is something really important that you'd like to have known earlier on?
Yes, and that is a no from a company is not a no forever. And obviously, I'm not suggesting people should pester them and ask why and knock on their door all the time. But for me, as an example, I remember I sat down with you, and we were working on everything, and all of a sudden I gotten feedback from some of the jobs that I applied to. So one of them was CGTN in London. So I actually got to the second or maybe even the third round where I had to submit something online and do a bit of a test, and then the trail has gone cold. So basically, no thank you. And I was a bit disappointed, but okay, goodbye, next thing. And I was on my way. And a few years later, I am working for CGTN. It is not in London, it is in Beijing, but it's an even better job that I could have dreamed of back then when I applied first time. So I think this is one of the things. They say maybe no now, but that is not a no forever. Really keep that in mind.
And I also think that don't lose hope generally about, as you were experiencing when we first spoke, just that radio silence, as I call it. It is deflating. It doesn't help. It's an exhausting process anyway, but don't let them beat you that way.
Yes, 100%. But again, then talking to you with someone who knows a bit about it, who's active working in the industry himself, who's up to date with what people are looking for, what's happening in the industry, that gave me a bit of hope and perspective about it as well. Otherwise, I would have literally just shouted into this big black abyss and didn't know why nothing is coming back. So I do think that then searching for industry professionals who can share a bit of light is really helpful, not necessarily only in the media industry, but any industry that you want to crack into, I guess.
Well, Leonie, it's fantastic to speak to you. I am so proud of all the work you've done. I say this to every client and former client that I speak to when I do the podcast, but really, I'm also super proud that you are a listener to Reuters World News and a podcast that I work on, and a loyal follower of that. So you get extra points for that. Fantastic speaking to you. The academic stuff, good luck with it. I know you're studying again, as you mentioned. I just come out in like shakes as I think about studying. So I admire you being in a job and doing it's fantastic. Like you say, you don't sit still, but it's been fantastic to catch up with you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
And thank you. And I'm so glad we're still in touch, David. So good to hear from you. Thank you.
Now, Leonie made a lot of great points during that chat, but I want to pick up on just one of them, which was about not thinking that a no from a company is a no forever. Don't allow that to happen, because what I want to do is actually take that just a bit further, because a no for a specific job is not a no for that specific job forever either. Don't let a failed application put you off. Sometimes you need a bit of luck on your side, or just a bit more time to be really ready for the role. There can be a lot of rejections when starting out in particular, and I say the radio silences that people suffer, and you probably know what I mean, or even some of the rejections, are much more about the company's hiring than they are about you. Perseverance, as Ethan described on episode 4, can really pay off. That's it for this latest episode of the Media Mentor podcast. If you want some help with your career, then get in touch via the mediamentor.info. That's how Leonie did it. One-to-one sessions are held online and are totally confidential. If you want to keep across the latest media jobs, they're all on my website. Plus, we have that WhatsApp channel that you can follow where all the jobs I find get shared as they drop. Details in the pod description. Thanks again to Leonie for her insight on this episode, to Mrs. Mentor for looking after the website and making sure all the links are still active, and thanks too to Josh Sommer for writing this music, and of course, thank you for listening. Remember to click follow on your podcast player to keep up to date with the latest episodes, and please write a review if you've enjoyed listening.